Hi everyone, in this video I will be going over the CodeChef problem, convert the string from the 2020 May Lunchtime contest. The problem statement is that we are given two strings A and B, each with the length n, and we want to convert string A to string B by performing operations of a certain type. And so the operation would involve choosing a subset of characters in string A and then letting C equal the alphabetically smallest character in the subset. And then we would replace every character in the subset with C. So let's look at the first example to better understand what this is asking us. So here we have two strings of length 5. And so the first string is ABCAB, and the second string is AABAB. And again, we want to convert string A to string B. So the answer to this test case would involve choosing two subsets. The first subset would be 1, 2, 4, and the second subset would include indexes 0, 1, and 3. And so if we apply this first subset, then that would mean that we are taking indexes 1, 2, and 4. And then we would find the alphabetically smallest character, which in this case would be B, and then we would change all the characters in the subset to B. So then we would get A, B, B, A, B. And now if we apply this second subset operation at indexes 0, 1, and 3, then that would mean that we would find the alphabetically least character, which in this case is A, and then we would replace all characters in this subset with A. So then we would get A, B, A, B. And then we notice that this gives us string B. Okay, so let's look at a few different examples to see if we can find the cases in where it is impossible to convert string A to string B. And in this case, we need to output -1. Okay, so let's say we had string A, which is ABCD, and string B, which is BACD, so two strings with 4 characters each. And so if we try to figure out a way to convert string A to string B, we notice that the first characters in these strings that do not match up are A and B. So at index 0, these characters do not match up, which means that we need to somehow have A in this first string be a part of a subset. We want to convert this A to B. However, we notice that it would be impossible to convert it to B. And the reason why is because if we take A and we put it a part of any subset, the least alphabetical character would be A, which means that we can never convert A to B. And so in this case, this is an impossible situation, and we would return -1. And so this brings us to our first observation, which is that A of I must always be greater than B of I. At each index, the character of string A must be greater than the character of string B. So if A of I is less than B of I at any point in the string, we want to return -1. Okay, let's look at a different example now. Let's say we had string A equals AAA and string B equals AAB. So here again, we can notice that it would be impossible to convert string A to string B because string B contains a B, but string A doesn't, which means that again, whatever subset we take of string A that includes this A over here wouldn't really do anything because we don't have a B to change the subset to. So this brings us to our second condition that we need to check for, and that is that we need to make sure that all characters in string B exist in string A, because if they don't, then there's no way to change A so that we get that certain letter. Okay, now let's assume that these two conditions have been met. So in that case, how would we approach solving this problem? Well, let me go back to the first example. So we have string ABCAB and we have the string AABAB. So the idea behind this approach is that whenever we encounter two characters of the same index that are not equal to each other, then we know that we need to put that character into the subset. And so I'll denote S to be the subset. And so again, we put the index of the characters that do not match in S. So in this case, that would be 1. And so the next thing is that we need to find a character in string A that does match with the character in string B. And so the reason why we need a character in string A that corresponds to the character in string B that we want to change it to is because if we were to perform the operation, then all characters in the subset in string A will be replaced with that character. And so that would mean that we would need to put the index of at least one of these A's in string A in our subset. So either index 0 or index 3 or both. Okay, so the last thing I want to go over is the order in which we should change the characters. And so the idea is that we always want to check the highest letters first, so the alphabetically greatest letters. So the reason why is because if we look at this example, so we notice that there are at two indexes, the letters in string A and string B do not correspond, and that is at index 1 and at index 2. And if we choose to change this B to A first, so if we choose to handle index 2 first, then we would get A, C, A, C after we change B to A. However, the issue is that now with this string, we cannot change C to B because there are no B's in string A anymore. So in order to fix this, we need to always make sure to choose the alphabetically greatest letters to change first. So for example, if we had changed the C to a B first, then we would have gotten A, B, B, C, and then we can easily change B to an A. So we would get A, B, A, C. So the order is that, again, we always start alphabetically greatest. Okay, so now given our approach, our conditions, and the order we want to do the approach in, we can now code the solution to this problem. I'm going to be going over the code now. So first, I already created a variable for the number of test cases, and I'm inputting that here. And then while t minus minus, I'm inputting n, which is the number of characters in each of the strings, and I'm also inputting each of the strings a and b. And then I'm calling this function called solve. So within this function, the first thing we want to check for are the two conditions we've already established. And the first of those two conditions is that we want to check if a of I is less than b of I. So in order to do this, we can just iterate from 0 to n and then just check in each index whether or not a of I is less than b of I. And if it is, then we want to see out -1. Now, the second thing we wanted to check for is that we wanted to make sure that all of the letters in string B are present in string A. And in order to do this, I'm going to create an integer array called present, which has 26 values, each representing each of the values of the alphabet. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to iterate through string A, and I'm going to increment present based on each of the letters in string A. And then I'm going to iterate through string B, and I'm going to check to make sure that present of each of the characters in string B actually exists. And if it does not, then I will return -1. So again, if present of each of the characters in string B is not equal to 1, then we're going to see out -1. So now let's move on to the approach. And in this approach, the order in which we want to go in is that we want to go from the highest alphabetical characters to the least alphabetical characters, as I already explained. And so what this means is I'm essentially going to do a for loop that goes from character C equals Z to A. And so what we're essentially going to be doing is that for each of these characters, we're going to be checking to see if there's any index in the string such that string A of that index is equal to C and string B of that index is not equal to C. And in that case, we know we have to perform an operation on those letters. So let me write that over here. So for n I equals 0, I is less than n, I plus plus. If A of I is not equal to C and B of I is equal to C, then we want to add the index we're currently on to our subset. And so I'll represent our subset with the vector called x. And so again, we would just push back the index we're currently on, which is I, to s. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to find a letter in string A that corresponds to the current letter we're on in string B. And so we only want to do this if we actually have something in our vector, because that means we've actually found a case where we need to perform an operation. So if S is not empty, then again we want to find a letter in string A that corresponds to the letter in string B, and that letter in string B is just going to be C. Okay, so now we have gotten all the values we need inside our subset. And so we have finished one of our operations. And so what we want to do is we want to store this subset of this operation we just did. And so in order to store it, we're just going to create a vector of vectors called ants. So let me just create it over here at the top of the solve function. And so what I'm going to do is, if S is not empty, I'm going to push back S, which is a current subset we are making. I'll push back that into ants. Okay, so now finally, again, we finished our operation. So now we want to update string A accordingly. So what I'm doing is I'm iterating through each of the indexes inside our subset, and I'm just setting A of that index to equal C. So that way we're updating string A accordingly with the operation. And so now we've finally finished everything inside this for loop. And so this will get us all of the operations and it will store it inside this vector ants. Now the final thing we need to do is we need to print out all this information in the format they want us to print it out in. So the first thing we want to do is we want to print out the number of operations. And that would just be ants.size. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to go through each of the subsets inside ants. So I'll do for each of the vector i's inside ants, we're going to first see out i.size, which represents the size of each of the subsets. And then we want to see out each of the values or the indexes inside the subset. So I'm just going to do for int j equals 0, j is less than i.size, j++, I'm going to do cout I of j. And then here I'm just going to do a cout endline. And so now one last thing I want to mention is that I forgot to initialize all the values in present to 0. So make sure you do that. So do for int I is equal to 0, I is less than 26, I++, set present of I to 0. And so that concludes the code for this problem. I will make sure to have a link to this code in the description below. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We'll be posting more future videos about CodeChef contests and also other contests soon.